On Thursday local time, the Office of the United States Trade Representative announced on its official website that all ships constructed and owned by China will be charged fees based on the quantity of goods they carry when docking at US ports. The relevant charging measures will come into effect 180 days later and will be implemented in 2 phases. According to the detailed charging rules announced in the communiqué, in the first phase, starting from October 14 this year, the US will levy maritime service fees on any ship operated by Chinese entities or owned by Chinese companies at a rate of 50. This amount will increase by $30 per year over 3 years, reaching $140 per ton by 2028. For maritime service providers using ships built in China, fees will be charged based on either the net tonnage of the ship or the number of containers, whichever results in a higher charge. This amount will also increase annually, starting from $18 per net ton and rising to $33 per net ton by 2028. Another charging standard is $120 per container, which will increase to $250 by 2028. There is a separate charging standard for non-US built ships carrying automobiles, with an initial charge of $150 per car equivalent unit. In the second phase, which will begin in 2028, restrictions will be imposed on foreign-built ships engaged in liquefied natural gas (LNG) transportation. Over the following 22 years, requirements will be gradually tightened, increasing the proportion of ships flying the US flag and operated by US entities until this proportion reaches 15% by 2047. The ultimate goal is to gradually reduce dependence on foreign LNG ships through year-by-year restrictions and enhance the United States' self-sufficiency in this crucial energy export sector. Some media have also noted that the fees for Chinese-built ships do not apply to shipping operations in the Great Lakes of North America, the Caribbean region, or those traveling to and from US overseas territories. Ships arriving at US ports empty and preparing to load bulk export goods, such as coal and grain, are also exempt. Additionally, shipowners can qualify for a 3-year exemption from fees or restrictive measures if they can provide evidence of orders for US-built ships. According to the United States, the reason for introducing such a policy is to revitalize the US shipbuilding industry. Relevant US officials have stated that the Chinese shipbuilding industry has been rising rapidly, while the shipbuilding capacity of the United States has been declining, necessitating immediate action. Data shows that in 2024, China accounted for 55.7% of the global shipbuilding completion volume, 74.1% of new orders, and 63.1% of outstanding orders. Overall, China holds more than 50% of the global market share, firmly establishing itself as the world's leading shipbuilding nation. Other major players include South Korea with nearly 20%, Japan with around 12%, the European Union with nearly 8%, while the United States accounts for less than 1%. In essence, China is on the verge of monopolizing the global shipbuilding industry, which greatly concerns the United States. After all, the shipbuilding industry is a crucial strategic sector for a country, impacting not only economic development and international trade, but also maritime rights and military security. However, the question remains, can this approach truly revive the US shipbuilding industry? Judging from the current situation in the United States, it seems highly unlikely. The shipbuilding industry requires a large number of industrial workers, low production costs, and a complete industrial chain, none of which the United States currently possesses. Even with the widespread application of robots in the future, which could potentially address the issue of labor costs, solving the problem of the industrial chain remains a significant challenge. Moreover, due to the significant outward spillover of production capacity, US port throughput has been steadily declining. Calculated by tonnage, China's port throughput accounts for over 30% of the global total, while that of the United States is approximately 10%. Calculated by container volume, the US accounts for around 7% of the global total. In the list of the top 20 among the world's top 100 container ports, China dominates with 7 ports in the top 10, while only the Port of Los Angeles from the United States makes it into the top 20, ranking 19th. Given the dominant position of Chinese ports, if China were to announce reciprocal measures and impose port entry taxes on US ships, the US plan to revitalize its shipbuilding industry could very well be derailed. However, when two rivals engage in a confrontation, a third party often benefits. If a full-scale trade war breaks out and China's share in the shipbuilding industry declines, the ultimate beneficiaries are likely to be the shipbuilding industries of South Korea or Japan. Media reports indicate that after a slow recovery at the beginning of the year, South Korea's shipbuilding orders rebounded strongly in March. According to data from Clarkson Research Services, in March 2025, South Korean shipyards secured 55% of the global orders by tonnage, amounting to 820,000 tons, compared to China's 520,000 tons. Compared to February, South Korea's shipbuilding orders showed a significant increase, as China had captured 70% of the orders by tonnage in February. Historically, South Korean shipyards have lagged behind China in the first quarter orders. In the first quarter of 2024, South Korea received only 16% of the global shipbuilding orders, while China obtained 70%. In fact, the surge in South Korea's orders in March can be attributed mainly to US investments. In February 2024, US Navy Secretary Carlos Del Toro visited South Korea and Japan, urging their shipbuilding companies to actively undertake orders for US Navy vessels and encouraging them to invest in the US shipbuilding industry. This may be the true objective of the United States. On March 2nd, the South Korean newspaper, the Korea Economic Daily, reported that following enhanced cooperation between the US Navy and South Korea's shipbuilding industry, civil shipbuilding cooperation between South Korea and the United States was expanding. The Wall Street Journal also reported that South Korea built the most advanced Aegis destroyers for the US Navy at a cost of $600 million within 18 months, while the United States previously took 28 months and spent $1.6 billion to build similar Aegis destroyers. Therefore, Washington hopes to replicate South Korea's shipbuilding efficiency in the United States. Hanwha, a South Korean shipbuilding giant, has already invested in the United States and will soon start building ships there and repairing US Navy vessels in South Korea. In other words, recently, the United States has not only placed a large number of shipbuilding orders with South Korea, but has also been attracting South Korean shipbuilding companies to invest in the US, aiming to revive the domestic shipbuilding industry. South Korean officials have indicated that South Korea may use this US request as a bargaining chip to seek tariff exemptions from the United States. If this approach proves effective, the United States is unlikely to stop there. Instead, it may intensify similar actions and replicate this model across other sectors. On a deeper level, this represents a test of US control. For instance, it aims to gauge the loyalty of its alliance system, testing whether allies like Japan and South Korea will follow suit. It also assesses the strategic resolve of developing countries, such as whether Southeast Asian nations will cooperate. Additionally, it probes the tolerance threshold of Chinese enterprises. Ultimately, this goal is to define the boundaries of US control and establish a new Cold War-like pattern of fragmented rules. In the capital markets, the United States has revealed another trump card, forcing Chinese-listed companies pay DRS to delist. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently stated in an interview with Fox News that everything is on the table, including delisting Chinese companies from US stock exchanges. Coincidentally, the Chinese tea brand Baowan Chaji went public on the US stock market at this sensitive time, leading many to worrying that it might be the last Chinese-listed company in the United States. Chinese companies began listing in the United States in October 1992, with Brilliance China Automotive, controlled by Young Ron, being the first. Over the following 3 decades, hundreds of Chinese enterprises ventured to the US stock market, either issuing stocks or depository receipts, primarily listing on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. During the golden decade from 2000 to 2010, many of China's most dynamic and rapidly growing companies flocked to the US for listing, leaving Chinese investors unable to access these stocks. After this honeymoon period, the enthusiasm for Chinese companies to list in the US waned, leading to 3 waves of delistings: 2011, 2012, 2015, 2016, and 2020-2022. There were mainly 3 reasons for these delistings. First, some companies faced issues with financial irregularities or even fraud, attracting the attention of US short-selling firms. These firms would quietly build short positions, release short-selling reports, and then significantly undermine the company's valuation, often resulting in serious civil liabilities. Second, some companies found that their valuations in the US market were less than ideal and believed they could achieve better valuations in China's share market, prompting them to delist from the US and relist in China. Third, during the first phase of the US-China trade war, the United States, leveraging the dispute over the inspection rights of audit working papers of Chinese listed companies, passed the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act (HFCA) Act, systematically targeting Chinese listed companies and forcing many to move their listings to Hong Kong, Singapore, or Europe. The US rationale behind suppressing Chinese listed companies is as follows. The United States boasts the world's largest and most active capital market, which is the preferred exit route for most venture capital firms. Venture capital investments in startups typically seek exits either mid-way or after the company goes public, making the listing location crucial. Investment firms generally prefer exits through listings in the United States or Hong Kong, as the former offers higher valuations and the latter provides lower tax burdens and greater capital mobility. The United States believes that by blocking Chinese companies from listing in the US, it can dampen global investors' interest in Chinese tech startups and thereby curb China's development. As long as the US-China rivalry continues, Chinese listed companies in the US will remain in a precarious position, at risk of being forced to leave at any time. However, in recent years, the risk of forced delisting for Chinese listed companies has been an ever-present threat. Overseas funds have significantly reduced their exposure to Chinese listed stocks, with some even liquidating their positions entirely. Although specific data on US-listed Chinese stocks is lacking, trends in overseas active funds selling of Hong Kong stocks suggest a similar pattern. Moreover, Chinese listed companies themselves are well aware of the persistent delisting risk. As a result, during the period from 2020 to 2022, many Chinese listed companies moved to list in Hong Kong. According to incomplete statistics, from 2018 to April 2025, a total of 31 Chinese listed companies listed in Hong Kong, achieving dual listing. The enthusiasm was particularly high from 2020 to 2022, with 9, 8, and 11 companies returning to Hong Kong during these years respectively. These companies form the backbone of Chinese listed stocks. As of the close of trading on April 14th, the combined market capitalization of these 31 companies reached 4.9 trillion yuan. In contrast, the total market capitalization of 387 Chinese listed companies was 6.86 trillion yuan, indicating that over 70% of Chinese listed companies have already completed their return to Hong Kong. Evidently, if the remaining companies withdraw from the US, most are likely to list in Hong Kong. What impact would this have? In January this year, China's central bank explicitly stated its intention to increase the proportion of foreign exchange reserves allocated to Hong Kong listed assets. So far, there have been no signs of the central bank purchasing Hong Kong stocks, suggesting that it may be waiting for the right moment. Once Chinese listed companies are forced to delist from the US, the central bank will likely have sufficient funds to absorb the resulting market liquidity. Therefore, there is no need for excessive concern about the forced delisting of Chinese listed companies. Both enterprises and policymakers appear to be better prepared today compared to 5 years ago.